Hi, and welcome back to our Week 12 talk about communication technologies. So I promise the next two screencasts will be far shorter than the introduction. 32 minutes, I believe, is a little too long, but I wanted to get those points out of the way so that we had more of an opportunity to really delve into the two insights that we are thinking about when we think about communication technologies and their social impacts. So here we go. In the next two screencasts, we will individually take a look at two contrasting arguments. So if we recall way back in the first half of the semester when we were struggling through understanding the difference between technological determinism and social construction theory, all that struggle is for naught. This is where we are going to be using it to help us think through the social impacts of communication technologies. So the first insight is, of course, technology shapes how it is that we communicate. And probably the most powerful purveyor of that argument is the great Canadian theorist Marshall McLuhan. So Marshall McLuhan is the author of a book that he wrote in 1967 called The Medium is the Message. He thought it was a fun way to play with the term mass age. And also it was a typo when his book came back from the publisher, when his manuscript came back from the publisher, they had misprinted the title instead of message into massage, and he decided to keep it because he thought it was clever and funny. But in this book, McLuhan makes a really provocative argument about what social impact the technological, the communication technologies had on society at that time. And remember, this is the 1960s, so we are only about a decade or so in from people having televisions in their own homes, people still using the radio for getting their information. Car radios are starting to become available, so that is something new, and better telephone and being able to call somebody it was made so much easier during this time period. So you can see what context McLuhan is speaking about when he is making his predictions and presumptions about mass media. So when he's talking about mass media, what he's talking about is all of these things, as well as newspapers, novels, film. All of these things contribute to the imparting and expression of information. So in The Medium is the Message, McLuhan is making an argument that the form of communication shapes how it is that we communicate. So another way of putting it, the kinds of technologies that we use to communicate shape what it is that we communicate, which is a really provocative claim. So he goes on to say that, media are extensions of our senses. They ground us physically, but expand our ability to perceive the world. So another way of thinking about this is, when we're watching TV, where our eyes and our ears are getting visual and audio information and sensation from what we see and what we hear, and that allows us to perceive the world as if we are there. So we are able to see footage from far off places and get a bit of an understanding of what it's like to live or work or love or hate in any of these areas. So you can really see what McLuhan is trying to point out to us here, that the actual tools of our communication limit and shape how it is that we perceive the world around us. Now, you probably want to ask yourself here is whether or not he's arguing for a technologically deterministic understanding of technology, or is he trying to make a social-constructivist understanding? Take a moment to think about that. So, to get a bit deeper into the real genius of McLuhan, maybe I'll bounce back. Oops, I'll bounce back here. When he's talking about how the medium is the message, he's talking about this technologically deterministic argument, right? That the medium tells us what message and meaning that we are to be getting out of the sensations of the experience of viewing or listening or reading those ideas. So it's a really abstract but rather genius way of being a technologically deterministic theorist. So to move on a little bit more McLuhan for us, because this idea that he has that the medium shapes the message is something that we still are grounded in today when we talk about media studies and communication theories. And McLuhan also points out something that is as relevant to us now as it was in the 1960s, that there's a criticality that we must have of the media and communication technologies, because it creates an age of anxiety, largely because we have to face the fact that technology can do most jobs better than us humans. So, a robot or something that is programmed can deal with, let's say, audio recording in a far better way than humans can collect the sounds and edit and put it together. So there is a sense of anxiety that is created by all of this technology, and especially communication technology. Because when you think about the root of communication, as we talked about in the previous screencast video, that it's really the imparting of and expressing information. And the best way that humans have of doing that is by telling stories. So, it's not unreasonable to feel anxious, McLuhan argues, about communication technologies, because they can do a better job than we can. And he also points out something that remains relevant, that humans are also left anxious by media because media is totalizing and unavoidable. And think about it, media bombards us with messages constantly that coerce us politically, personally, economically, psychologically, and morally. And the media leave no parts of our lives untouched. And just think about our daily lives, like we log on to social media to check out the news, and all of that information, whether it is about our friends or about things going on in the world, is mediated. It is kind of narrowcasted and controlled by the company of the social media that you're using, but also the editors and an algorithm that creates product and advertising that is designed to what it has learned about us and that we would be inclined to look at and click on or even go and buy. And that's just waking up in the morning and looking at your phone and checking out social media. Think about Going to the bus, we see billboards where we sit to wait for the bus. We see signs and more billboards as we're driving to and from school or work. Our clothing is full of tiny sewn crests and letters that denote a brand allegiance, a lifestyle that comes from dressing or behaving and speaking in a certain way. So media has done a lot to bombard us with messages that help construct our reality. So, I leave that point there because that is really the heart of McLuhan. But it does help us understand some aspects of communication technologies in a technologically deterministic way. So that is insight number 1. And if you're interested, I have included a very brief video in our learning module on Blackboard that just explains these points about McLuhan in a jazzier way than just me yakking. So that's it for this little video. Check in to see insight number 2 very shortly.